Welcome in, folks, for another episode of What's Bruin. The playoffs are starting to wind down, and actually beforehand, Gayle, welcome back. We were discussing. You mentioned that someone had sent out a tweet or something about the players should lock out because we were talking about this dreaded playoff format. Before we dive into that, though, Gayle, how are you? And everybody, welcome to the show.
I am well, and welcome to the show. Just winding down this extremely long weekend.
Yes, unfortunately, it's been made longer by these conference finals games that just seem to be going on forever. So what was this? You said someone said the players should lock out to
Yeah,
try
so I
to
had
get
said
the
the
old format.
Panthers. I had said the Panthers lead 3-0 in the series. The Canes, yeah, I don't see that they have it in them to win four straight. So to me, the Eastern Conference Final is boring. And so Alyssa responded saying we need a 1-8 system bad. Hopefully that's something the players will strike over. And I said, absolutely not. No, I do not want to strike or a lockout. Yes, it needs to change, meaning the playoff format, but stoppage and play will not help this league.
Doesn't
And
help the league, and this isn't a hill that you will die on type stuff.
and the response was, and I love Alyssa. She's a very knowledgeable hockey fan. But she said Bettman is not budging on certain issues. We all know that. Bettman has an ego the size of the whole entire United States and Canada and Mexico. And well, anyways,
The globe.
1-8 being one of those issues. I think the players need to exercise a strike to make the game better and a more enjoyable product. The game is growing, but Bettman and the Oilers need to be forced to get off their high horses. I disagree 100% because Bettman is not going to be around that much longer.
I was just gonna say, if we had 40 more years of Bettman to worry about, I'd be on board with it and say you got to send the message early. But
But they're not going to strike over a playoff format because the players aren't complaining about the playoff format. Whether they play the 8 seed, the 1 seed, the 2 seed, the 3, they don't care. They're in the playoffs. They know any chance, any given Sunday, any day of the week, they have the chance to win. So they don't care who they're playing. It's the fans that, let's be realistic. The best series that we've seen in these playoffs have been the Florida Toronto series. And even that series wasn't that great. It just happened to go 7 games.
I'd go so far as to say the best series have been the Dallas, Colorado, and the Winnipeg, St. Louis series.
Yeah, I'll give you Winnipeg and St. Louis.
Dallas, Colorado was at least a very close one, couple overtime games there.
Yeah.
Dallas, Winnipeg was a decent series. I think all the good series that we've seen have come out of the West this year. Granted, I think when you compare East versus West, the East, you have Florida. Tampa always looks good, but at this point, when can we start calling them a paper tiger again? And the West is where all the teams are. Winnipeg, you had storylines. You may have looked at them like a paper tiger, like I did, but at least there were storylines to keep you interested in what they were doing.
Well, I think that
Colorado, Vegas,
a lot of people were hoping that Hellebuck would show up.
and he certainly did in the final game.
Right, but he needed to do it, and so that makes it a little hard when he doesn't show up in the playoffs.
But at least with every team in the West, you can get excited to watch. Even when it was Minnesota and Vegas, Minnesota, you at least had the Marc-Andre Fleury story. You had Bouillon joining the team at such a late part of the season to see what he could bring. There was at least a little something there.
Right.
When you go down with the East, you're like, okay, Toronto, okay, can they finally get breakthrough and make it through? Yeah, probably not. Not the most exciting story. How are they going to blow it this year is really more or less the question there.
Right.
Ottawa, did anybody look at Ottawa and say, let's see if they can really actually do this? No, it was, they've got some great young talent. Let's see them get some experience this year and hopefully be better next year for it. Yay.
Well, and I think for Boston fans, they were hoping Ottawa would do a little bit more simply because of Allmark, and I think a lot of Boston fans are looking at, the former players, like Edmonton is Trent Frederick,
Sure.
Colorado is Charlie Coyle, obviously Florida is Brad Marchand. I mean, there's those connections now. Even Minnesota was Justin Brazeau,
Yep.
So I mean, there was all in Toronto, Brandon Carlo. So there was all those things, but Boston fans also are very much loyal to their own team.
Oh
So
yeah.
even the ones that are like, all right, Toronto's out now, I can go back to hating Florida. When if you look at Florida, Florida is what the Bruins have always been.
Yep. Oh yeah. No, that's.
And so if you're a hockey fan, if you're just a hockey fan, you take off the shades of the rose-colored glasses that go with your fandom. Florida is an excellent hockey team.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're the ones that you're looking at who can knock them off.
Hold on one second, Chris. I just need to shut my door.
Yeah, no problem. No, Florida is every bit the team that is the Stanley Cup champions. They're defending. The Cup's going to go through Florida. And so it's just seeing who has the ability to knock them off. And let's be honest, as when you put those Bruins glasses on, you sit there and go, Toronto, Ottawa, boy, it'd be hilarious to watch Toronto lose in the first round yet again after making the right moves this year. Because let's be honest, that's what they did. They made the right moves that they should have been making for the last 9 years. And, they actually did something, but just not enough. And then when we looked at it on paper, Tampa, Florida, everybody was pumped for that series. And Tampa just wasn't healthy, and it showed. No one was really excited for Washington, Montreal, and Carolina, New Jersey. Granted, the injuries to New Jersey really didn't make it appealing, but even still, who has looked at any series Carolina has been and went, that's going to be awesome to watch?
Well, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, Carolina is just boring to watch. People outside of Carolina say that, but not the Carolina fans themselves. But the other thing is too, is the National Hockey League bodes better to have Montreal in the playoffs.
Oh yeah, for sure.
To have Boston in the playoffs, to have Edmonton, New York, those big Chicago, and they're missing a lot of those teams, And so when they're saying viewership is down, it doesn't matter if Dallas has a great fan base. They're not a TV market that's going to drive ratings.
Dallas Carolina final would be the worst possible outcome for the league based on these final four teams. At least with Florida and Edmonton, you have the Edmonton draw. You're going to have the story to draw people in. Back-to-back matchups. Right. Can Florida repeat? Can McDavid finally get his and beat the defending champions? Right. There is a sellable story there. You put Carolina in the playoffs, in the finals. What's your story?
Unless it's Edmonton, then your only story is, does McDavid get his cup? Because other than there's no other story coming.
Can Skinner shut out another team?
Right, because the only other thing about Carolina is, did they finally get the monkey off their back and win an Eastern Conference final? You know what I mean? Because up until last night, they had lost 15 games straight in the Eastern Conference final.
Yeah. And this will not, no one's expecting them to win tomorrow at all. That everyone's looking at this series saying it's over. And so tomorrow's viewership for that game is probably going to be almost zero, all things considered. And if they win, it's going to be another situation of the same for game 6. They have to win both 5 and 6 for then people to go, oh, could they pull an 0-4 Red Sox and actually win this? But even then, most people are going to look at it and go, probably not. Probably not. Florida at this point can play.
I wouldn't give him an 0-4. Because if they
just the 0-3 factor, that's all.
No, but like even if you went to the 2009 Flyers,
yeah,
that beat the Bruins, they were down 3-0. They came back, obviously we know how that ended. I don't think Carolina has the in them.
No.
So,
but you have to get to that game 7 for anybody to really bat an eye and go, oh, could they actually do it? Probably not, but I'll at least tune in to see. And then 2 periods in, they'll probably shut it off. Honestly, I've been watching more of the Memorial Cup because that's been better hockey to watch.
Yeah.
Than this has been. But no, I agree. As much as I'd like to see the old format return, we don't have enough time left in Gary Bettman's tenure. Just wait for him to move on and switch it back in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. Make that the first thing that you go back to.
Right.
And honestly, for the new commissioner, it's a great win to start your tenure off with.
Yep.
So like it's almost like he's leaving that egg there so that the new commissioner can win fans over right away by going, we're going to go back to the old format.
Yeah.
Like and Bettman is that kind of guy. He would do that, not out of the goodness of who he is as a human being, but as much as I'm the stubborn guy who doesn't want to admit it was wrong. And if it was really that bad, then just let the next guy fix it.
Right.
I mean, this is the guy who let Arizona dwindle for years and not move them. So, but there's been plenty of other hockey to watch. There's been good hockey. I mentioned the Memorial Cup, which is I have on right now, even as we do the show. The round robin has been awesome. I don't know if you've caught any of it, but I know that you were also watching the Worlds.
100%.
Which Team USA wins. I got to say, before we dive into the Bruins who were playing, that was an awesome move by Werenski to run off and go get the Gaudreau jersey for the Cup.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was awesome.
I wouldn't expect anything less from that team.
No, absolutely not.
No.
And I will say it just all around great way of doing it for them. And I don't know if you saw, but they've even included his name on the little player list, the plaque list there. So, but the Bruins had plenty of players who were in the tournament. Mm-hmm. I want to start with Dan Zlotchmelis first.
Okay.
I know who you want to get to, and I want to save him for last.
Okay.
Because we're gonna talk about him quite a bit. So I want to start with Don Zlotchmelis. 7 games for Latvia. He was their number 1 center. 4 goals, 2 assists over the tournament. So 6 points in 7 games. Mm-hmm. Only 8 penalty minutes. So he took 4 penalties, and he has played tons of games for the Latvia team. I mean, I genuinely wonder how much he's actually going to push for a spot out of camp. I know we've talked about it. They're going to try and put their best foot forward, but given the new contract for Sweeney, which we talked about at length last time, do you think there's a little bit of runway for him to go with a guy like Zlotchmelis versus spending big to try to bring in another high-end free agent at high cost?
It depends on who's available. And because as much as Bruins fans want to see the youth movement, if they have the opportunity to get a bona fide goal scorer, I see Sweeney going for that because it's a quicker route back to the playoffs.
Yes, barring someone who we don't know is available. I don't think there's a single unrestricted free agent out there that bends the needle enough to say you have to overpay for them. Mm-hmm. But if they're like, you could Don Zlotchmelis is the guy that you could include in a trade.
But I don't see as well as he's played in college and as well as he's played in Worlds. The Bruins notoriously would start him in Providence anyways to learn the system at a less risk.
I would agree with that 99.99% of the time. The difference with Zlotchmelis, though, is his extensive international experience playing with grown men and the fact that he has already got the 6'1" frame that he would need to be in the NHL.
The Worlds is still different than the NHL.
But he's also done it in the Olympics. He's done it.
It's still different than the NHL.
Sure. But if anyone's going to be able to show and translate their game to the NHL and get that opportunity, it would be.
But I have no problems with him starting in Providence.
I don't either.
And getting called up. I have no problems with that. My issue is that if you start him in the NHL, it also depends on the coach. So that's the other factor. It depends on the coach. Because if they don't have the right coach that can actually coach a player instead of benching them for mistakes or this or that or the other thing, that just doesn't believe in the youth movement, Bruce Cassidy, like there's a lot of things that come into play for that. So can he push for a spot? He absolutely can. But who's to say that Matt Potter isn't going to push for a spot? Who's to say Fabian Lysell this year isn't going to push for a spot? There are players that are ready for the NHL depending on the coach and depending on what Sweeney does this offseason. Whoever they get in the draft is not coming into the NHL this year.
No.
So, but it also depends on their own unrestricted free agents, who they offer sheets to. It depends on their own free agents. It depends on the coach. And it depends on what UFAs or, again, maybe they offer a sheet to Nyes. I mean, we have no idea what Sweeney is going to plan. And I think it's until free agency hits, I think that we won't have a clear picture of who can push for a spot. Because say they do not have to overpay for Mitch Marner. Say Mitch Marner says,
I want to stick it to him.
I'll take 11. I'll take 12.
Toronto.
I'll take 11. I'll take 12. I don't need 14, 15. I want to be on a team that is a proven, that has a David Pastrnak, that has a Jeremy Swayman, that has a Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm. We don't know that. You know what I mean? But if I still don't say that Mitch Marner's coming, but we'll just use him as an example.
He's the shiny toy everybody wants. So
right. If they can get him for a decent price, who's pushing him out of the lineup? That's the conversation we always have.
Yeah.
Who are these kids pushing out of the lineup? Because again, do you want a Fabian Lysell in your bottom six? Do you want Matthew Poitras in your bottom six?
Would you
know what I mean? So there's so many different aspects that have to happen before you can say that this kid is making the roster.
Oh,
because
no,
I would
sure.
love to see Lach Mellis in a Bruins uniform next year.
I'm saying I think he gets serious consideration and pushes for one, again, barring what those other moves are. Yeah. And two questions. One, when are we finally going to get a head coach?
It depends. I mean, are they still looking at the Dallas assistant?
It doesn't sound like it. Everything the three names I keep hearing are
why? Who's saying it? Who's saying it? People that don't really know.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm
people
just saying
that don't really know.
The three names we continually see are Mitch Love, Jay Woodcroft, and Marco Sturm.
Right. So, I don't know. And it could be that they have the decision. Maybe they're waiting till the conference finals are done. Maybe they've already made the decision, but they're waiting till the conference finals are done. Maybe they're trying to dot all their I's and cross all their T's because they're trying to make sure that they have, because whoever they bring in, are they allowing that person to bring in are they bringing in their own staff? Are they keeping any of the existing coaches? So a lot of different things are coming into play there. So I don't care that Anaheim got their coach already because I don't want that coach. The only team that 100% got one of the best coaches available was the Rangers when they got Sullivan.
Yeah, but we also knew that Sullivan likely, like, there was a high end that he wasn't coming
Right.
here. And I would also admit, I would add to that list David Carlisle, who ultimately stayed in the NCAA.
Right. Well, yeah, but
But
he didn't leave. He stayed where he was. So I didn't put him on that list. But
no,
even
those are the
Tocchet,
two
like
that
I didn't like what has Tocchet done? Tocchet hasn't done enough for me to be like, oh my God, that's who I wanted for the Bruins. You know what I mean? So I think that is until they put their coach in place, until we see the draft of free agency. And again, I mean, I don't see goalie Bob being gone. But I could see a new head coach going, I don't want Chris Kelly. I don't want Jay Leach. You know what I mean? I could see them saying, I want to bring in, and again, it depends on now if it's Marco Sturm, maybe he does say, all right, I'll keep Chris Kelly. I played with him. I know what he's about. It could be, all right, maybe,
and there's a little bit of the Chara connection there too, with Chara
right.
back in the organization.
I mean, there's so many different things like, I know that at one point Sweeney on record said they're trying to figure out where Chara is going to be within the organization. Do they bring him in as a defensive coach? Does he want to coach? Maybe he just wants to be an ambassador. Maybe he just wants to, I mean,
Rask role.
right. He may not want to be on the ice as much as a Chris Kelly, a Jay Leach, you know what I mean? He may be like, oh, I can be there. I can come in and for team meetings. We don't know what Chara's role is because they don't know what Chara's role is.
Chara doesn't even know what his role is.
Right. And it could, we don't know how much Chara wants to be involved in hockey still. Bergeron has, he's never been, he doesn't want to go back into it full time because of his family. You know what I mean?
So, and I've wondered before out loud on the program, just how much I know they went out of their way to get Jay Leach back, which means they think very highly of him. Since the season is over, he's done some scouting trips. He's been on the ice in a coaching capacity, but also in a player development capacity. I wonder if they're looking at a little restructure of moving him maybe more to Adam McQuaid's team for player development side of things, because the other thing too is what if Chris Kelly doesn't want to be there anymore himself and he wants to.
Well, it also depends on the coach. Maybe he doesn't want. And the other person too is Joe.
Maybe Sacco. He didn't like Marco Sturm.
Does Joe Sacco want to stay on as the associate coach? Does he move on? Like, there's so many unanswered questions with this Bruin that I think it's really hard to. We can put our roster together. We can say that your top line is going to be David Pastrnak with Elias Lindholm and Morgan Geekie. Until they sign Morgan Geekie, that's not a definite.
Yeah, no,
right?
For sure.
Otherwise, that is the only line that 100% for sure.
Yeah, and the only reason why it's not is because he's still on RFA.
Right. So until they get him signed, you know what I mean? That's the only line. Because the second line, you know that you probably have Zacha somewhere on that line, but it depends on who his center is.
Or is he the center and it's around somebody else?
Right.
So
you know what I mean?
No, for sure.
And then you go down the line. So you can almost guarantee that Mark Kastelik and Johnny Beecher, if Johnny Beecher's still here, are they going to give him an offer? Again, these are all unknown. So how do you build a roster based on just the play? You know what I mean? So yeah, you can build a roster and you can say what you want to say, but until you hit free agency and you know what's going on, you have a better chance of building your defense than you do any part of the offense. Because we know more of the players that are definitely going to be here on defense next year.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, and this is probably a more rhetorical question, just because I know you don't have the answer. Maybe the next time you're puttering around down there and you see someone you can discreetly ask in very Kevin Paul DuPont way. What is the benefit that the team has from making these decisions so slow? Now, the reason why I'm putting it that way is because, to your point, we don't know. Maybe Donskov is still a candidate, and we just don't know.
Right.
Under the thought process that he is no longer a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
what is the benefit to waiting to hire your coach? If the 3 final candidates are Woodcroft, Sturm, and Love, what's the benefit of drawing out the process for another week and a half, other than we just want to interview each one of them 2 more times?
But the other thing, it could be them. Because what if they're high on the list for Pittsburgh? What if Marco Sturm's like, what if Marco Sturm is their top candidate? And Marco Sturm's like, okay, well, I have David Pastrnak or I have Sidney Crosby.
So the question I would have for that is based on Don Sweeney's general attitude at the press conference of, we want the guy who's going to want to be here.
Right.
My question to you is, if it's that much of a decision, you've made my decision.
Yes and no, because it depends. It also depends. So what if it's between Sturm and I can never pronounce his name, from Dallas.
Donskov.
Thank you. Donskov. What if it's Sturm and Donskov? So now you're waiting for Dallas to be done because you probably still have not done an in-person interview.
Well, that's why I took him off the table for the sake of this conversation.
But you can't take him off the table. You can't take him off the table because he could quite well still be. And
see, that's why I think they haven't done it yet. I still think he is a candidate until they pull the trigger on someone. I don't think he's ruled out.
No.
And I would not be surprised, given the way that the series with Edmonton has gone. If you look at how they went against Colorado, how they went against Winnipeg, and, even after game 1, Dallas had a pretty good handle on the playoffs so far. Now they've finally have hit a little bit of a rough patch. I can easily see him going, I need to take a step back from this. I got to focus on my team right now. We've got to focus on this.
Right.
And therefore, we hear that it's down to these 3 guys, when really it's still all 4 of them. And they're just going, hey, we have an idea of what you want to do for an assistant coaching staff. We're going to start talking to these guys to see where they are at. And because if he is their number 1 guy, which I really think he is, because he's the one who makes the most sense. Think about the way this team is going. They're going to a developmental, not a developmental mindset, but they're going into a spot where they need someone who can elevate the youngest players in the organization at the highest level. Mm-hmm. And they need someone who is going to be able to communicate with Don Sweeney in a player developmental language. This is what we need, and this is what we need to complement what I have, so that the right player can get called up. Mm-hmm. And if you really look at the way this team is set up, you have multiple high-end skill, like you have multiple players that do similar roles. They're just not, they're so far apart from each other. So for instance, at the NHL level, you have a guy like Casey Middlestead, a great puck distributor in the middle, right? The guy, if he gets hurt, the guy you want replacing him in the lineup is probably Matthew Poitras.
But how do you know Matthew Poitras not already in the lineup?
No, I'm talking about as far as the similarities in how they play, right? But behind Matthew Poitras, your 3rd guy on the depth chart, using air quotes around the phrase, is that William Zellers? Because like when you look at just the idea of a playmaking, puck distributing centerman, you have Middlestead. I wouldn't really put Elias Lindholm in that category, just because his 2-way game is so much better. He's that 2-way forward, if you will. The Bergeron, air quotes around, type player. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the quote-unquote Krejci role is where you have Middlestead. You could, I guess, say Zacha, but, I mean, not nearly as much. And then you'd have Matthew Poitras. And then you have Will Zellers. And then right now you're kind of figuring out, okay, well, we have Middlestead and Poitras in that role. Not a gigantic loss if you move on from Middlestead and you go to Poitras, but then you have no depth behind him if he gets hurt. Because that's not the kind of game that Watchmelis plays. That's not the kind of game that Fraser Minton plays.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need that player developmental path. And, you know, you need some of those younger guys. We've talked about it before. You have your right now guys, your fill-in guys, and your future guys. They don't have the fill-in guy if Poitras goes down.
Correct.
And those three guys, Middlestead, Poitras, and Zellers, they ain't big guys.
Right.
They're not exactly carrying around a 6'4" frame.
Because what they would do right now is they would move Kastelic up. You know what I mean? And then bring up a Patrick Brown. Or move Castle, you know what I mean? So that's what they're funneling in. Instead of being able to have that person ready, like we're talking about, they didn't have that depth. And that's something that, you know, has as much as people say they weren't prepared for Bergeron and Krejci to leave, they were and they weren't. Some of the kids aren't developing as quickly as they thought, number one. Number two, as we've talked ad nauseum, so I'm not going to rehash it 100%, but it kind of came as a shock when Bergeron retired. It wasn't like he was like...
If he plays for one more season, no one is complaining about we don't know who our next center is.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that one more year would have been Poitras' season in Providence. And we would be excited for the next guy because everyone would be going, we got this kid, Matthew Poitras.
No, actually, it wouldn't have been Poitras' season in Providence. He wasn't old enough to be in Providence.
When?
Poitras came in the year after the Centennial, right? Didn't he?
No, that was the year he got hurt.
He came in the Centennial season.
And he
would not have been in Providence because he wasn't old enough to be in Providence. That was the year that he got the 9 games in the NHL and they kept him. They would have had to send him back.
Right. So Bergeron plays one more season.
If Bergeron would have played the Centennial season, Poitras still would not have been NHL ready.
No, he wouldn't have been NHL ready, but he would not have made the team out of camp. He would have gone back to Guelph, and then the following year, which was the Centennial season, he would have been in Providence.
No. Poitras didn't play with Bergeron.
I know. Bergeron didn't play the Centennial season.
Right. That was the season that Poitras played.
Right.
Poitras played the Centennial season.
That's the season he would have been in Guelph.
Right.
And so this past year, the one we're in right now, the current one that we're in right now, Elias Lindholm's not signed because you have this year of Patrice Bergeron.
No, you don't. You said one more year.
I'm sorry.
Didn't play the Centennial season.
Right. So you have Bergeron for the Centennial season.
2 more seasons.
Right. Sorry. Bergeron does play in the Centennial season.
Mm-hmm.
Then that Centennial season, which was 2 years ago.
Correct.
Poitras in Guelph.
Correct.
Okay. The following year, Bergeron's gone. You go one season without Bergeron, and that season, Poitras in Providence.
Okay, but who's filling in? But that's the whole thing. No one was ready to take Bergeron's spot.
Right, but you're off by 1 year, not 3.
But they're not. They were only off by 1 year because they brought in Lindholm.
Well, that's just it. So they would have brought somebody else in. It's clearly the answer anyway.
But they were bringing someone else in anyways.
Exactly, they were bringing somebody else in anyway because that's just how they roll. That's what they do. Right. So, anyways, it's funny because we got to all this off of Don Watchmelis played as the number 1 center for Latvia at the Worlds. Let's circle back to that.
Okay.
This is why we end up with 3-hour-long shows.
God help me.
We're not doing 3 hours tonight, I promise. No. I want to jump around a little bit because
Edmonton just scored.
What's that?
Edmonton just scored.
I've got the I've got the Memorial Cup game on.
I've got 2 TVs, but I have the Edmonton, Dallas, and I have the Red Sox on just because I don't know why.
I mean, we'll call it your day job.
Kind of.
You know, you got to at least know
that
what's
was
going
a
on.
nice goal. It was
Who got
Draisaitl.
Draisaitl? Well, at least someone's scoring for
Short
Edmonton.
side, right over the skate. Oh, beautiful goal. See, I love Leon Draisaitl. So.
Oh yeah, no. I remember when he was coming to Boston too.
Oh.
So next on the list that I have is Jacob Lauko.
Okay.
2 points in 6 games for Czechia. As much as I hate the dog shit stat that is the plus minus, he was a +2, which means when he wasn't on the ice for a point that he scored, he was an even player.
Mm-hmm.
And he only had 1 penalty.
Right.
If you can have a bottom 6 player, let's face it, he's more of a fourth line guy anyway, who doesn't take penalties, but can draw penalties, occasionally scores, a third of the time scores, puts up a point, and is a positive player, that is something to be excited about.
I like Lauko's game. I've always liked Lauko's game. I think, unfortunately, he wasn't utilized properly the last season that he was here. And so he didn't get to build his confidence or anything else.
Last time I checked notes, that was Jim Montgomery coaching.
There was Jim Montgomery coaching. But I think that given if he has a role, he's one of those kids that he has a role. Is he going to be AJ Greer? Maybe, maybe not. AJ Greer is doing fine on the fourth line in Florida.
Yeah.
See, and again, we could talk about there's no way the Bruins thought they were going to lose Greer.
No. At the time,
they did not think that Calgary was going to scoop. They did not think they were going to lose him off of waivers.
Oh, it's the same thing that happened to Jordan Osterley this year.
Yeah. You know, they honestly, and Greer would be doing what he's doing for Florida in Boston had he not gotten claimed by Calgary, you know?
And the fact that they lost Greer leads me to believe they're going to do something to retain Lauko. One, you don't bring him back in that trade without the idea that you plan on keeping him. Right. Now, the plan could change. We've fully acknowledged that when we hash out the depends on the head coach conversation. Right. But there is no reason to believe they want to move on from him.
Right.
So just throwing him in there, it was a pretty successful Worlds for him. What's that?
I don't think they want to move on from him either.
No.
I think that they would like to retain him.
And with his rights, there's no reason they wouldn't. Andrew Peeke played in all 10 games for the United States, 4 penalty minutes, 3 points. Not much to expect from him point-wise.
Well, he's not an offensive-minded defenseman. He's one of your stay-at-home, does his job, and, you know, he does a little bit of everything. He's not going to be on the power play. He's just going to be a defenseman that you're not worried about his side of the ice when he's out there.
Exactly. He showed that he can successfully do his role as what you hope a shutdown defenseman. Honestly, a cheaper version of Brandon Carlo. Not to the same level.
He just needs to get stronger on the PK, and then I would say yes, 100%.
Again, that's why I said a cheaper version of him. He's the Walmart version.
Because once he's not Temu, he's Walmart. Once he gets that elite PK, which I think he will, because he's going to be used, I think, more on the PK next season. But again, maybe not. It really depends on the health of the defenseman, you know? Sure. And even so, he doesn't need to be elite then if they have the other defenseman, right? You know what I mean?
He's your third. He is ideally your third pair.
Right.
On the right side. However, if he gets elevated into a 20-minute-a-night guy, he can handle it.
Right.
As long as it's not, we need you to push the offense type of role.
Right.
And that's great. and it's much better than getting the wish version of Brandon Carlo.
Right.
Mason Lohrei, 5 games, 3 points, no penalties.
Right.
And a +4. The only reason why I mentioned the +4 is because everybody shat all over him for winning the golf award this year, having the worst plus-minus.
Well, and the thing is that he had a horrible season. He had a horrible regular season. I didn't expect him to be Hampus Lindholm or Charlie McAvoy, and if people expected that, then they were in for a rude awakening.
And I
know he played solid last year when he was called up, not this immediate last season, the season before. Him and Beecher both, when they came up the second time, they performed really well. But a lot more pressure was put on him this season with the loss of Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy.
Oh, yeah.
So he's going to come back a lot stronger, I think, because he's going to be able to watch tape and see what mistakes he made. And you know what I mean? And so I don't think, but again, I'm not going to be opposed if they package him and move on from him. I don't think he's like, oh my God, they have to keep him. They have to keep him. Do I want to keep him? Why not? But he's not one of my, he's not a deal breaker for me.
I think the only people on this roster that you and I would sit there and really tilt our head and go, what the fuck are they doing if they traded him, would be Swayman, McAvoy, and Pastrnak. And even then, Pastrnak is clearing away the highest one on that list.
I would also, unless...
I think everybody else, you sit there and go, what did they get back? Before I react, what did they get back?
Yeah. I think the only other person that I would kind of be iffy about on the current actual roster, that I would be like, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? Would be Zadorov for me.
Yeah. But again, Zadorov, McAvoy, and
Swayman are below Pastrnak.
Are significantly below Pastrnak on the list. They're the ones that make you go, they did what? Well, what did they get back?
Right.
Everyone else you're sitting there going, oh, okay, well, I hope they got something good back and they made it worth it. So
I would even put Lindholm on that list if he's healthy, with Zadorov, kind of down below Swayman and McAvoy, because we all know that
there's a ranking there, but
we all know the Bruins are trying to build around Pastrnak, McAvoy, and Swayman. Those are the 3 that they're trying to build around.
Right.
There's no doubt that this team 100% changed with the loss of Hampus Lindholm over anyone else this past season.
Right. And yeah, so like I said, there's a ranking in there, and I'm sure I can write that at some point, but that's not where I'm going with it. I'm actually kind of glad to see that he only got 5 games too out of the 10. I mean, it would have been nice to see him get all 10, because that would have showed a lot higher element to his game. But to see him get 5 tells me he's kind of right around where you and I have positioned him. He's not to the level of Hampus Lindholm. He's not to the level of Charlie McAvoy, which would mean he got all 10 games, maybe 9 of them. He's still learning. So he's able to take the tape from these and learn and watch them. And you know what? At 3 points in those 5 games, I'll take it. I am not complaining about what I saw from him in the tournament. Yes, he was going to make mistakes. You knew he was going to make mistakes.
Right.
But at what, 24? 24, you expect those mistakes.
Right.
Flying along here, we got 3 more guys who are over at Worlds. We will zip over to David Pastrnak next, because Pastrnak was still Pastrnak. I believe he led the entire tournament in scoring. 15 points, 6 goals, 9 assists in 8 games. Pastrnak just continuing his Pastrnak ways.
Right.
2 penalties throughout 8 games. I mean, do you have any thoughts other than just that's pasta?
Well, I mean, that's pasta, but I will also add that he led scoring, but he didn't lead in goal scoring. He led points, but we've seen that from Pasternak more last year too, that his playmaking is not just he's a well-rounded player. Does he play defense when he has to, but he's not going out there on the penalty kill? Is he a full 200 player? Yes, to a point. He's not going to be David Krejci. You don't want him to be David Krejci. He's not going to be Chris Kelly. He's not Patrice Bergeron. But he's a playmaker and a goal scorer, and that's enough for me.
You know what else he's not going to be? He's not going to be Mitch Marner either. Right. Mitch Marner does a way better job at the defensive aspect of the game. But what David Pastrnak is showing you is that the right winger can drive your line.
Right.
For years, we've looked at this team and been like, okay, your driver is Patrice Bergeron. Your driver is David Krejci. Your driver is in the middle of the lineup.
Right.
And David Pastrnak is saying, no, I can do that from my wing.
Right. Yep.
So no complaints about him there. Right behind him in scoring, though, was everyone's favorite contract to bash on, Elias Lindholm. 14 points, 8 goals. He got more goals than David Pastrnak did in 10 games.
He had the most goals in the entire tournament.
I know. I was just trying to put it in perspective for the David Pastrnak fans. And also, he didn't take a single penalty.
Right.
If you notice, our NHL guys, Lindholm, Lohrei, Peak, Lauko, Pastrnak, a grand total of, let's see, it was 4-8 of 10 penalty minutes. Remember, one of the biggest things this year for the Bruins was how much time they spent on the penalty kill, and their penalty kill was dreadful.
Right.
Well, you and I have talked at length about how Lindholm, now that he's healthy, bounce back season. Just the defense being healthier, bounce back season. I want to know, even take the injury factor out of it. You got McAvoy, Lindholm, Peak, Lohrei, the Bruins D-core. Are they better than Peak, Kesselring, Bouillon, Shea, Lacombe, Lohrei, and Werenski?
Yes.
By quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
And yet, during the regular season, everyone was shitting all over Jeremy Swayman. He comes to this tournament, has a worse defense in front of him, has 2 shutouts, a goals against average of 1.69, a save percentage of 92.05%, gives up 5 power play goals, and plays in 10 games.
And undefeated in the games he started.
Yes.
He didn't start all 10 games. I think we need to point that out. He did not start all 10 games. He started 7, and he was undefeated in the 7 games that he started.
But he did play in all 10.
Correct.
He held a goals against average of just shy 1.7. 2 of those starts were shutouts.
He took the net from Joey Daccord. He took the net.
Absolutely.
He was not supposed to be the starter. He took the net.
And by the way, the U.S. was 8th in the tournament on the penalty kill. Mm-hmm. So they were dead middle. They could not have been more mid on the penalty kill, which was still a better penalty kill than what he had in Boston this year.
Right.
Are we allowed to say that he's definitively going to have a bounce back season as long as the defense in front of him plays well and stays healthy?
I even without his performance in Worlds, I thought he was going to have a bounce back season.
Doesn't this just prove that though? That's what's going to happen though?
Right. Well, because basically this is his training camp.
I mean,
this is his preseason.
In the 10 games he played, I'm pretty sure he gave up a total of 12 goals.
Right.
And 5 of them were on the power play.
Right.
Which means he gave up 7 goals in 10 games in 5-on-5. I think one of them might have been one shorthanded goal or something.
No, and people will just people don't care. Because I've said after they won the gold medal and he, I mean, literally 24 saves, 1 goal was scored in the entire game, and it was in overtime. But he
hell of a goal by Tage Thompson, by the way.
Right. Oh, it was a beautiful goal. But my whole thing is that I was like, he was dialed in. And because he was dialed in, that's the Jeremy Swayman we saw that took the net from Allmark. Mm-hmm. He's going to be dialed in next season because he knows that he did not perform well. Whether the team in front of him was playing well, he did not perform well last season. He was not. There were pockets of time that you would see Jeremy Swayman from the season before in net, and you would hear it, the way he was moving side to side, the way he was, controlling his rebounds. And then there was games where he didn't have it. You know what I mean? He's going to have it next
Dallas
season.
Or whatever it was.
Right. Oh. And when I say Swayman's going to tell the haters where to go, he's not going to say it verbally. He's going to say it by his play in between. And I've got response people like, it doesn't matter what he says. He has to show it between the... Well, that was what I meant. He's going to tell the haters where to go because he's going to let his play speak for himself. And I am sick of hearing if he had just shut up and didn't talk about his business classes and this, that, and the other thing. Like, that had nothing to do with it. Him saying that he did his research had nothing to do with why he was underperformed last year. Part of the reason majority of the reason why he was underperformed last year is because of the fact that he missed training camp.
Mm-hmm.
His head was just like, get me a contract, figure it out. And I don't believe that the pressure was on him. I truly believe that it was because he missed training camp. And that is a huge, huge factor for especially a goaltender.
We've seen him with pressure on him, and he comes through. It wasn't a pressure thing. He thrives under pressure.
Right.
Honestly, teams are going to hate him the same way we hate Jordan Binnington because he thrives under pressure.
Right.
So, like...
Well, Jordan Binnington didn't thrive under pressure in Canada.
No, but that wasn't entirely on him either. There were other factors on that. But no, for sure.
Canada lost. He didn't even make it to the gold medal game. Canada didn't even make it to any of the medal games.
4 Nations. So he outperformed Hellebuck in 4 Nations.
That's Hellebuck.
I know. Oh, I would love to see Binnington Swayman in the Olympics. All right. That's what I would love to see when that finally comes around. But I digress. It also does not mean the Bruins aren't going to start looking at goaltenders as well. They're going to be looking at guys who are years
They're not going to look at goaltenders for Swayman. They're going to look at goaltenders to replace Korpisalo.
Well, I think Korpisalo is back next year.
Oh,
I don't think they move on from him.
I do too. I don't think they move on from him either. But my point is that they're not going to try and replace Swayman or Korpisalo this year, but they need to figure out what's going to go on in Providence, number one. And number two, I don't see Korpisalo saying past his contract.
No, I think they'll look to move him in that final season because, again, if their intent is
the same way with Allmark.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is by the time the new cap kicks in, $3 million for your backup is not going to be as much as people are treating it right now.
But people treating it the way they are right now are, no offense, they're putting too much stock on it anyways, because it wasn't the whole entire, if the team
get hurt.
If the team didn't have as many injuries as it did, if it didn't end up in the toilet like it did, and it made the playoffs, people will bitch about anything that they can bitch about. Whether they have a good season or a bad season, they're going to find something. Just like they bitch about David Pastrnak's turnovers, regardless of the fact that he was in top five in scoring in the entire league.
That's why they should trade him. So
yeah,
Bobby Brewski chiming in though. Thanks for jumping in, Bobby. He says watching Bobrovsky. Bobby Brewski watching Bobrovsky. Absolutely deliver in the playoffs again. Gives me so much hope for Swayman. Could be just pure optimism, but I'm with Gayle. Big comeback season incoming. Honestly, Bobby, I'm keeping an eye out on the betting sites to see when I can throw a couple bucks down on Swayman for the Vezina, because that is one that's going to continue to grow all season. And there will be a chance where you can cash out if you really want to, but I mean, he's a prime candidate for that kind of season, and he's capable of it too. That's the thing. And I forget who I was talking to last season, but it was shortly after LA did the Darcy Kemper deal. And I was like, watch out for Kemper having that kind of season in LA, because he's capable of it, and that's the kind of team he can have it with. And obviously, no one's beating out Hellebuck, but Kemper put himself in that position. So there's something there. But no, they're going to, like we said, they're going to start looking at other goaltenders to replace DiPietro and Bussy, because neither one of them are their number one or their number two right now. And they've already brought in that other kid, Zazujac. I'm going to butcher that. I'll keep trying on that one. He is clearly the starter right now in Providence. Until you have DiPietro or Bussy signed, you're not getting them both. You are going to be lucky to get one of them.
Right.
And so I still think in the later rounds, the Bruins draft a goaltender. They're not going to do it in rounds 1 through 4, guaranteed. They don't need one that bad. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't actually draft one, simply because even your youngest 17-year-old goaltender is on a 4 to 5 year play-out plan to be in the NHL. You are still going to have 3 years of Jeremy Swayman left at that point. And in 5 years, he will be 31. You're going to be sitting here going, where in 3 years are we re-signing him to another contract? That's the conversation you're going to start having in 3 years about Jeremy Swayman. So the kind of guy they're going to look at who's on a 5-year plan is an undrafted guy.
Right.
Like I wouldn't be surprised. I would have to we'll have to keep an eye on their invitee list for camp, but I really wouldn't be surprised if you see a kid like Austin Elliott from London on that list. He's 21, so he's ineligible for the draft, but he's going to be in Boston's backyard next year. The kid is going to U Lowell, and he has been lights out in the Memorial Cup.
Right.
So, I mean, that kid's a perfect 4-year college kid, and just like we saw, Calum Tung out of where did he come out of? That wasn't Northeastern, but you know who I'm talking about. From this year, he signed with the Islanders. Calum Tung.
Yeah.
I forget what school he was with. But undrafted. And see, now I have to look it up.
I was just going to look.
Also, when you spell it right, because he's with Hartford now. I said Bridgeport, but you know what I mean. He was with UConn.
Okay.
So just someone like that. Anyway, that's how they're going to look to replace their goaltending, because that's a problem for down the road.
I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Oh, okay. I was going to see where you wanted to go with things next, but
yeah, just keep talking about goaltending. I'll be right back.
Okay. I don't really know where else to go with it, though. That's the problem, because they have Swayman. Korpisalo's not going anywhere. He gives them the second best chance to win now. The goaltending position is going to be looked at in terms of winning now just as much as everything else. So
I heard you. I just had to say goodnight to my daughter.
gotcha. So I don't see Korpisalo going anywhere unless a really, really good deal comes along.
Right.
And goaltenders just don't go for that amount.
No, so the other thing is too is that someone when I said the thing that I said about Swayman, someone on Twitter said, and I call it Twitter. Nobody else would have paid him $8 million for 8 years. That's a BS statement.
Other teams would have been giving him 9 or 10.
Right. That is a BS statement. If anyone thinks that Jeremy Swayman didn't earn the contract, again, he had a down season last year. So did the whole friggin' team. But yes, he had a bad season next year. You can't say it's a bad contract after one season.
No.
Now.
Especially when 31 other teams, we'll say 29 other teams would have given him the exact same contract.
Right.
And yeah, it just, nope, not willing to go there just yet. I mean, let me put it to you this way. What team is picking up the phone going, hey, Donnie, what would you want from me if I wanted to take Korpisalo off your hands? What team is making that phone call? Because Sweeney might be able to throw him in and say, hey, instead of getting a third-round pick in this deal, we can help you improve your goaltending if you upgrade it to a first-round pick, and we adjust the package in this way. He can have that conversation, but Donnie's not picking up the phone, calling 31 teams going, what will you give me for Korpisalo?
No. Just like he's not picking up, like he's picking up 100%. He's picking up the phone anytime any team calls him.
100%. That's his 100%. Job.
They could be like, listen, we'll give you this for Pasternak. They're going to pitch it.
Sure.
They're going to pitch it. Whether or not Donnie Sweeney takes it is a whole other story. I'm sure he's getting calls on Swayman. Listen, maybe he needs a change of scenery. Teams are gonna try and pitch that. We'll take his contract and him off your hands. We'll give you this, this, and this. Is Sweeney going to take that deal? Nope. Not unless it's Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl coming back the other way. You're not giving up your goaltender for a first-round draft pick.
What Jeremy Swayman proved in the playoffs is that he can go on a run that wins you a cup.
Yeah.
That's his ceiling. So now you need to put the pieces around him to give him the chance to do that.
Yeah.
Because that is exactly what Tim Thomas did for you. That is exactly what Brodeur did countless times for the Devils. That's what Patrick Waugh did countless times for the Avalanche. Were they all perfect? Nope. Not a single goaltender in the Hall of Fame has a save percentage of 1,000.
No, and I will throw if he wins a second Stanley Cup, I'll put Bobrovsky on that list.
Absolutely.
Because look at what you know what I mean? Like, so many people were down on him. And look what he did last year.
And the funny thing is if the cap rises, like we all make fun of Toronto because the cap didn't rise and they put themselves in with the big four, the core four and core five, whatever, and all that stuff. But if the cap went up the way it was supposed to, Toronto would never have been in the cap jail they were in. And no one is making fun of that Sergei Bobrovsky contract today.
Right.
They already shut up as soon as they won their first cup. And they went, contract totally worth it.
Right.
So you have an 8-year window. There's 7 more years left to win with Jeremy Swayman, and one cup at everyone goes totally worth the entire contract.
Correct.
So there's got to be some patience in there. But I know you were super pumped to talk about Swayman and his performance at Worlds.
Yeah, I just think that people, the Boston fandom notoriously hates their goaltenders.
Yeah.
Look how much hate Tuukka Rask gets.
He still gets it, minus when he's in person with people.
I know. People hate Tuukka Rask. For what reason? You can't blame 2019 on him.
No.
You can't blame 2013 on him.
I think it was Ty who put it the right way when all the questions were coming out about Connor Hellebuyck is what people said Tuukka Rask was.
I disagree with that. I 100% disagree with that, because how far is Connor Hellebuyck gone?
Second round.
Where is Tuukka Rask gone?
Finals.
Right.
But no, what he's saying is
and even in 2009, it wasn't until him and David Krejci got injured that Philadelphia stormed back.
Right. No. What Boston fans claim Tuukka Rask was.
Oh,
but haters.
That's not who he is.
No, it's not. But that's why it's Connor Hellebuyck was looking to be what Boston fans described Tuukka Rask as.
No. But Tuukka Rask didn't suck in the playoffs.
But that's the thing. Everybody thought the narrative was that he does. But he couldn't win the big one.
But there's a difference between not winning because you ran into different things and actually imploding in the playoffs. Connor Hellebuyck imploded in the playoffs.
So have the Hurricanes too.
Right. Well, they have Frederik Andersen.
He was lights out in rounds 1 and 2.
But again, remember, who is in net in 2013 when the Bruins beat Toronto?
Oh, Andersen. But we can't put that entirely on him either.
No, but you have certain minds. Goalies have different mindsets, right?
And the funny thing is Andersen didn't start pushing himself more to perform the way he did last night until they turned the net over to Kochekov for a game.
Correct.
And he went, oh shit, I could lose my net.
Right.
Ooh, Medicine Hat just went up 2-1 to start the third. You know, it's funny because I'm watching these games going, London has 26 shots on net right now, and they just entered the third period. When was the last time we saw the Bruins with 26 shots in an entire game?
Really?
Just the disparity.
Well, I mean, just think the other night, Carolina had 7 shots on goal through 2 periods.
I know.
Not last night. It was 2 games ago. 7 shots through 2 periods.
And that's what they've been trying to do to other teams. That's how they won in the first 2 rounds. And then they just had it done to them. Like, Florida Panthers right now are just playing with their food.
Yeah. They really are.
They're sitting there going, well, honestly, what they're doing is they're looking at the West going, if we do this right, we won't have to worry about rest versus rust because we can just end it right when they do.
But I don't think they're concerned with rust anyways.
I don't think so, but it's more or less we can do this whenever we want. So let's, they're playing with a mouse. They won't kill it. Otherwise, they got nothing to play with.
And let's be honest, who's the better coach?
Oh, Maurice.
100% Maurice is a better coach than Brind'Amour.
When do we start having the conversation about Rod Brind'Amour? You know how they always say there's the coach. They say it about general managers too. There's the coach that gets you there and the coach that puts you over the top. Mm-hmm. Well, what if Brind'Amour's just not the coach to get you over the top?
What if Brind'Amour's not even the coach to get you there?
I mean, he's gotten them mostly there. So, I mean, at least for a rebuilding team, it is what it is. But the biggest thing is I will criticize Brind'Amour the same way I criticize Montgomery for doing it. They don't make adjustments.
Montgomery made too many adjustments.
He made adjustments to the lineup. He didn't adjust game strategy.
No, he did because he did.
Well, okay, sorry. Sacco was the one who didn't make the adjustments.
Right.
Montgomery just threw shit at the wall and hoped something stuck.
Right. And I think Sacco was literally just trying to tread water to get through the rest of the season, if we're being honest.
Yeah, you really, I mean, we all know that Sacco didn't get a fair shake at the job. It was just go do this through the end of the year, get us through, do your best. If you can make the playoffs, great. We'll probably give you the job. But then come the deadline, it was, we're going to strip you of everything that you have legitimately to work with. And good luck. Just
No,
get
it was
through it.
Sacco's job to give the youngsters a look so that Sweeney could see what they had.
Yeah, right, but at that point, once the trade deadline came around, it was, we're not making the playoffs. Don't worry about that. If you pull off the miracle, great, but just get the right kids playing time, get them to play our way, and let's see. That's why I mean, again, if he was going to get the job, I think he would have already had it by now.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
So, but that's why I said when the season ended, there was a legitimate chance, in my opinion, that he could have ended up with a job. And I think he is the guy who, like, you know, if they get to the end with Donskoff and they decide, or he decides, you know what, we didn't win it in Dallas this year and I want to stay for one more year to try and get over the hump next year, and he pulls himself out of the running to stay with Dallas, I you know, and there's no one else at the dance floor, they could still end up with Sacco.
I disagree with you. Because I don't see him going, oh, okay, I was your last choice. I'll take it. No way. No way. No way. If they were going to give it to Sacco, they would have already given it to Sacco.
Yeah,
it's too deep.
It's
too deep. It's too deep.
I keep going back to that.
I don't see how he goes, oh, okay. So he turned you down. So your second choice was Marco Sturm, but you decided not to go with him. Your third choice was Mark Savard. I'm just throwing names out.
Oh, yeah.
And then you settled for me? No. As much as he loves the organization, he would be a sitting duck, and he knows it. Because he would have the shortest leash. He would have also, if they said you weren't our choice, but we're going to go with you, he has the shortest leash out of everyone because they weren't his choice.
Yeah, that's why I keep going back to, if they were going to give it to him, he'd have it already.
Yeah.
I think they're just trying to figure out where he belongs in the organization.
I think if he and that's the other thing, it depends on who they bring in. So if they bring in someone and they say, you know what, you still retain, like that new person may say, I don't want him. I don't want him because I need to start from scratch because he had the team. And then how does Sacco say, yeah, I'll stay on as an associate coach? You know what I mean? I understand. How many interim coaches who don't get the tag removed and become a head coach, how many stay with the organization? You know what I mean? How many say, I was good enough to do it for a short period of time, but you're given to someone else, and now I have to listen to someone else again instead of calling the shots? How many people stay and don't move on for other opportunities? Now, it could be that he, if it is like a Marco Sturm, say it is Marco Sturm, and he says, I want you to stay on, like Sturm wants him to stay on because he already has the rapport with the players, that he can help him, build up his team or whatever. It depends on the relationship that he already has with whoever the coach is coming in.
Yeah, for sure. And we also don't know, maybe he is reflecting on his job as the coach, going, if they offered it to me, I would have accepted it, but I think I still need more time as an assistant to learn a few more things. Here's where I think I can improve.
He's been an assistant coach for almost 10 years in this organization. He doesn't need to learn anymore. He doesn't need to learn it. And he's been a head coach before. It's not like he's never been a head coach. He's been a head coach, and then he's been with the Bruins for 10 years. How much more learning can he do?
So then here's my question. If he's not a head coach now, under these circumstances with the Boston Bruins, will he ever be a head coach again?
It depends. Maybe, so if he stays on as an associate coach, then maybe like another team like a Chicago that's still going through a rebuild says, you know what? Now we need a coach that's going to, a different type of coach, not a coach that has 15 years experience as a head coach. Maybe we need someone that's ready to start over and they can start, you know what I mean? Because that's a lot of it too. You look at the reason why Tortorella left Philadelphia.
Just not the right situation that he wanted to be in.
Right. And because he does not want to go through a rebuild. He does not. And the Bruins aren't going through a rebuild. They're going through a retool. So they're ahead of the game when it comes to coaches, because they don't need, like, the other thing is too, is that we see what's going on down. What about Mougenel? Does he stay in Providence? I'm not saying he's going to be the head coach in Boston, but what I'm saying is,
does he get elevated?
Does he get elevated? Does he become an assistant coach up in Boston? Does he stay down in Providence? Does the new coaching staff say, you know, do they move on from Mougenel and bring in you know what I mean? Like, there's so many falling pieces. We really have no clue until they make the announcement. And anyone that says this is what they're going to do, they don't know unless they're Don Sweeney or Cam Neely.
Honestly, I don't even think they know what they're going to do yet.
No.
It's yeah. And I've been going through looking at some of the goaltending situations, and I'm still sitting here hard pressed to find a team that Korpisalo, when I say helps, I mean significantly improves their goaltending situation to the point where it makes sense for the team to take on him as a $3 million number two. Right. He's not going anywhere to be a starter, because every team in the league already has their starter in mind. Like, the one team that I've arrived to so far has been Utah, because even though Ingram's in the last year of his deal, I can't remember whether it was Ingram or it was Vejmelka. One of the two just went to the players' assistance program towards the end of the season. We don't know when he'll be back.
Right.
I think it was Vejmelka who went in. So bringing in another starting caliber goaltender to kind of help keep that ship going would make sense. But at the same time, there are other options. It does not have to be Joonas Korpisalo. They could go for Jake Allen.
Right.
You know, Jake Allen as a free agent isn't going to cost you something. You might cost you $3 million, but he's not going to cost you $3 million against the cap and a draft pick to get him. Now, Utah has plenty of draft picks and definitely can't make all of them. You know, you could take a 2026 third round with a conditional second or something like that from them. You could do that, but you know, that's not enough to warrant taking Korpisalo off of your team and setting your team back far enough if Swayman gets hurt. Because that's the other thing I was talking about when you left for a minute. This team has already made it known they have one goal: make it back to the playoffs and compete for a Stanley Cup within 2 years. They want to be a contender again, maybe not a cup contender next year, but they want to be a playoff team next year and a cup contender the year after that.
Oh, no. They want to compete for a Stanley Cup. They're not saying we just want to make the playoffs. They want to compete for a Stanley Cup. Now, again, let's be realistic. If this team is 100% healthy this past season, right?
They're a playoff team.
They're a playoff team. So going into free agency, a couple of pieces gets them over that hump, right?
Yep.
So let's be realistic. So now this team is healthy going in. It's a lot easier to replace a Charlie Coyle, nothing against them, but it's a lot easier to replace a Charlie Coyle, a Trent Frederick than it is.
You already have a Charlie Coyle replacement in Fraser Minton. But he can do it.
Right. But I'm talking about next season. 100%. If you're going to be a playoff contender, a team to compete for the Stanley Cup, it's a lot easier to replace a Charlie Coyle than it, you know what I mean? So the only player, like, again, one thing that they lacked last year, which they are well aware of, is their secondary scoring.
Yeah, they need a guy who can put the puck in the net.
And a healthy defense.
Yeah.
Their power play was shit last year.
But was the power play shit, or was the power play shit because they lost their top two defensemen?
No, because the power play was shit when they still had Hampus Lindholm.
They
weren't
playing Hampus Lindholm on PP1 until the game he shattered his knee.
It doesn't matter if he was on PP1 or PP2. Their power play sucked last year. A lot of it had to do with Elias Lindholm not being healthy. So he was in the bumper and he shouldn't have been because he wasn't healthy. Well, a lot of it had, you know what I mean? A lot of it.
Lindholms being hurt last year crushed your power play.
Right. Well, not only that, but every single player started the season off slow.
Yep.
So by the time players caught up, they lost so many other players.
Now you got me a question. Did I say Hampus Lindholm was on PP1?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because he was not on PP1 until the game against St. Louis when he shattered his knee.
Right. But it doesn't even matter if he was or if Charlie McAvoy or who. It doesn't matter.
The whole thing just didn't work last year.
It did not work. And that was, and Sweeney talked about that 100%. Talked about that the power play just did not get to where it needed to be. Because by the time Pastrnak started scoring, Morgan Geekie started scoring, Brad Marchand started scoring, they lost a ton of players.
Yeah. I also wonder, because again, there's 31 other teams out there that are going to be looking to get better as well. I wonder if a team like the Blues look at some of the players they got on the end of their contracts. So, and two great examples, Broberg and Holloway, who they brought in on 2-year deals. They made them look really good. Maybe they look to flip Dylan Holloway. They gave up. Holloway was a 3rd-round pick in based on his AAV, but a 23-year-old center who can play on the wing for just shy of $3 million. You don't think a team with an extra 1st-round pick might be willing to part ways with that,
right?
To bring that in, a team like, I don't know, Pittsburgh or Nashville. Nashville's going to do something. Barry Trotz was at the game last night for the Memorial Cup, and granted, he had 2 prospects who were playing in the game, but he's going to make moves. And I've heard Jonathan Marchessault's name thrown out there as someone who could become available. Ryan O'Reilly obviously doesn't have trade protection. They're going to treat him like he does, though. I mean, even a winger like Michael Bunting could be moved.
Yeah, but I also think that if the problem with it, like a Ryan O'Reilly, is his age.
Well, yeah, with Ryan O'Reilly, you're not getting him because other teams can outbid you for him if he becomes available via trade.
Right. But why, if you can, at that point, what does he offer you over some of your prospects?
Who, O'Reilly?
Yeah. His veteran leadership.
What I'm talking about with O'Reilly is if he gets moved somewhere else, the domino effect of what might become available on that team.
Oh, I thought you meant for the Bruins, and I'm like,
so as an example, right? If I'm Ottawa, I'd pick up the phone to call Nashville and say, "Hey, we'd be interested in Ryan O'Reilly." Right? He'd probably be a pretty good fit there. Well, what does that mean for their top 9 at that point? Because we know they already moved on from Norris last year to bring in what's his name from Buffalo. So they're making moves. I know Frank Saravalli sent out, he did his, 20 trade targets or whatever. And I don't know, somehow, I mean, I get it. JJ Peterka's on the list. Don Sweeney's not doing his job if he doesn't call Buffalo and say, what are you looking for JJ Peterka? That's his job.
Right.
My question is as a pending RFA, are you going to want to pay that price?
Right.
I definitely don't want Chris Kreider. I'd be okay with being in on Marco Rossi. Marco Rossi is someone that you might be able to get via an offer sheet just because of their situation. Let's see, who else does he have on his list? Honestly, no. I mean, the list, when you look at it from a league perspective, looks pretty. I mean, I'd take a look at Lucas Reichel if he's actually available from Chicago.
I mean, there's a lot of people on the wish list. I mean, if we go back to even like the RFAs, right?
Yep.
Who's to stop Don Sweeney from putting an offer sheet in on Jason Robertson?
He's not an RFA until 2 years from now.
Oh, that's right. He has one more season left.
Yeah.
That's right. He has one more season left.
That's why I look at him as a potential trade target, because he will hit restricted free agency. He's at what, $7 million and change right now?
Yeah.
So his next contract, he's going to be looking for 10 plus.
Right.
And I'm not saying Boston should do it, but he's certainly a great bridge guy for a year. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't sign a Mitch Marner now and pay 10 plus million to a winger now, in 2 years, you have the ability and the space on your cap to do that with a Jason Robertson. Mm-hmm. If you bring him in now. I don't see Jason Robertson, and Mitch Marner would be of that 10 to 12 ilk for me. But I don't see Jason Robertson there yet. I would certainly give him 9.5 as of right now. Right. I'd like to see another.
He just scored. That was why he was on my radar. He just scored.
I mean, that's the thing though, is he can score goals. Mm-hmm. He had a 50-something goal season at one point, if I remember correctly, like 2 years ago. So like he can score goals and score a lot of them.
No, he had 46.
Okay, so it was
46 is his career high.
But
that was the season. That was the season he had 100 points because he had 63 assists.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Okay. I knew he had one season, but like if he can come close to a 35 goal season on the regular, mm-hmm. he's worth adding to help your second line scoring. Mm-hmm. Or your first line scoring, put him opposite Pasternak, and at least then you have a true lethal scoring line. So I'm just looking at some of the other RFAs. There's no way you're getting Matthew Nyes. It's just not happening. JJ Peterka, they can match any offer he would have to be traded for. I don't touch Evan Bouchard. Gabriel Velarde would be interesting, but I think Winnipeg finds a way to keep him. They've been good at signing their own guys. So I'm looking at the rest of the RFA list, and Will Cooley in New York, I think, would be a legitimate target for an offer sheet for anybody, but Boston for sure. I also wouldn't mind seeing if you could try to make a deal for Connor Zary in Calgary. But I mean, what are you targeting is the bigger question. Because everyone jumps to we need centers, but
I don't think they need centers. I think they need.
We've got centers coming out our ears.
It's not. They have the centers. What people saying they need centers is because they expect people to be Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci, which it's that old adage, they're not walking through the doors. You are never replicating those two players. You have Elias Lindholm. You have, is he a top line center? Yes, he is. Patrice Bergeron did not put up offensive numbers. You know what I mean? Like if you look back, Patrice Bergeron, he was a 200-foot face-off playmaker who could score goals, and he had the chemistry with Brad Marchand and everything. And don't get me wrong, I love Patrice Bergeron, but how many, like, I'm going to do a comparison.
I'm looking through the list. There are a total of 28 restricted free agent right wing and left wing wingers, basically. And none of them really do much. Let me see if I can go contract details here. Years remaining. I think if they're going to make a move, it could be as high as it could be a significant deal with someone with as much term as a year or two left on their contract to kind of help fit that window. But I look at that and I go, you've already got one of those guys in house, Fabian Lysell. Like, you know, when you at least want to get to camp and see what he's able to offer you. I mean, unless maybe you look at Vegas to try to get Alexander Holtz, but that's a massive projection for Holtz.
All right, so Bergeron played nearly 400 more games than Elias Lindholm has played, and has just under 200 more goals. So yes, Bergeron definitely. I mean, but Elias Lindholm is not Patrice Bergeron, but he's a good enough center to feed the puck to David Pastrnak.
Yes, and he views the game in a similar way,
right?
Which means the chemistry will develop significantly as time continues to go forward when they play together. So
we saw it down the stretch.
Yeah, and the closest thing that you can get to Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak, because that was everybody's amazing line. And no, I'm not going to call it that, but that was everybody's dream line. The closest you're going to get is the guy who can muck things up on the left. Morgan Geekie can do that. The guy who has a defensive-minded ability to still move the puck around in the middle with David Pastrnak doing David Pastrnak things on the right side.
Right.
That's how you're going to replicate what that line was capable of. You're not going to get the same output because you don't have two Hall of Famers, basically three Hall of Famers.
Right. Well,
you don't have three Hall of Famers on the line.
You want to look at Elias Lindholm, okay? His points in Calgary, his best output was the year they had Gaudreau and Tkachuk. Okay.
Pastrnak can very easily be the Gaudreau of the line, and the Tkachuk of the line can very easily be the Morgan Geekie.
Correct. So when people are saying that Elias Lindholm it will never replicate what he did, that's BS, because you're basically saying that David Pastrnak is not as good of a hockey player as Johnny Gaudreau. Rest his soul. But I would take Pastrnak over Gaudreau on my top line.
Yeah. I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who honestly wouldn't do that.
Right. And that's the whole thing. And I know that people are like, well, he didn't perform. Well, because look at who he had after them.
Oh my God. We don't even want to go there.
Right. So, but that was the same thing with Krejci, right? When Krejci had his wingers was when Krejci was able to put up numbers. But when he had the rotating wings.
At the wingers.
Right. When he had the rotating wings.
David Krejci put up numbers when he said, "Hey, Carson Kuhlman, go over here and I will deflect it off of your ass."
Right, but they still weren't the numbers that he had when he had Nathan Horton and Milan Lucic.
No, they weren't. That's the problem that I
Right.
think a lot of people have with the Sweeney era is they didn't do enough, in their opinion, to get Krejci the consistent winger. The problem is every time they brought someone in to be his winger, injury or inconsistency or a combination thereof. Like there was a season where Louis Eriksson looked like he had that ability to be that guy. There was a season where Nick Ritchie never really looked like he had the ability, but that's what you brought him in for. Matt Bolesky had a stretch where he looked like he could do it.
Right.
But then you were doing the reason why he had the success he had with the Danton Heinens and the Carson Kuhlmans is because they stayed in the lineup.
Right.
You could figure out what they were capable of.
Right.
That's the brilliance of David Krejci is he knows the game well enough to know, okay, Carson Kuhlman can get to here.
And no offense, but he would have had it with David Pastrnak for a lot more had they not, Bruce Cassidy, taken David Pastrnak off that line and put him with Bergeron and Marchand. You know what I mean? So, like, you would have had two solid lines. Because when they finally, it was Montgomery that moved Pastrnak down and put Jake DeBrusk up with them. Mm-hmm. And then you had that secondary scoring.
Out of nowhere. It's like, oh my God, it was almost like it was here the whole time.
Right. So had David Krejci had that, you know what I mean, had that support, things would have probably, but that's the whole problem. So now you have Elias Lindholm.
How many seasons?
Is a damn good 200-foot center. And he now has David Pastrnak on one side, and as long as they get the deal done, he has Morgan Geekie on the other side.
How many seasons? Sorry, go ahead.
What?
I was going to say something. Go ahead. You finish first.
If those three together, that is your top line, without a doubt. Sweeney's job is to fix that secondary scoring behind Pastrnak, Lindholm, and Geekie. That's his job.
And between
that is
whatever you put together with Kastelik. But but the question then becomes, how many seasons did Bruce Cassidy not get the most out of the depth scoring because he refused to move Pastrnak down a line and break up Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak? There were times where he did do it.
Right.
There were times where he did do it, but he didn't stay with that for any significant length of time to the point where a Jake DeBrusk could find his spot on that line.
Correct.
So how many seasons is that on Don Sweeney or is that on Bruce Cassidy?
I don't put that on Don Sweeney.
How
do you put that on Don Sweeney?
I agree with that. But that's not where.
But
that's saying something good about Don Sweeney, and we can't do that.
The other thing is too is you got to put some of it on Jake DeBrusk. He shouldn't have had to have been with Bergeron to score.
I think it was more or less left versus right. He was always a better right winger than he was on the left.
Right.
But Bruce Cassidy kept him in the third line left wing spot. Mm-hmm. Occasionally moved him around. There were times where he had him on the right wing on the third line, and he looked way better.
Right.
Jake DeBrusk is a right winger. He's not a left winger. And it just, there was stuff there. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But that's not on Don Sweeney.
No.
That's on Bruce Cassidy. But we can't say that because Bruce Cassidy has a ring, and Don Sweeney can't draft in 2015.
And you know what? And I know a lot of people love, and I liked Bruce Cassidy when he first started. I didn't hate Bruce Cassidy when it ended.
Bruce Cassidy, in my opinion, had a lot of flaws as a coach when he was with Boston. Losing the job in Boston, going to Vegas, he has learned a lot and improved significantly as a coach.
Correct. 100%. 100%. It doesn't help that he did it so quickly in Vegas, which is why people say, well, we had, the blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like they don't.
But that's not the Bruce Cassidy that you had.
Right.
You did not have the Bruce Cassidy who lost a job and finally got another opportunity. Now, we all knew Bruce Cassidy was a great coach. coach. There was no doubt about it.
Right.
But that's like saying we all knew Tyler Seguin was a great player.
But
he didn't mature until he got traded.
But the other thing is, too, is that people complained about Bruce Cassidy until they fired him. And then it was like, oh, my God, he's the scapegoat. Sweeney is the problem, not Bruce Cassidy. And then when he won, then you know what I mean? Because, again,
it matched the narrative they wanted to see.
That was exactly. And it's the same thing with Jim Montgomery.
And the funny thing is we know, based on what Don Sweeney said coming out of that season, Don Sweeney planned on bringing Bruce Cassidy back.
Mm-hmm.
It came from somewhere else to let the coach go.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether you believe that came from the players and came from
you'll never know
Neely or any of that stuff, we need to tell all
never know
who was in the room. We need the fly on the wall to write a book.
You'll never know.
But
because not one player, until maybe 10 years removed, Jake DeBrusk may come out and say, but he's not going to say it while he's playing, because while he's an active player, he's never going to throw a coach under a bus, because that makes him look like a prima donna. You know what I mean?
You know how it's going to come out? Someone's going to slip up on one of their unobstructed views broadcasts. And it's just going to slip out, and people are going to be like, wait, who said what?
Because it's going to be well after a playing career is over.
Yeah.
No one's ever going to say a word as long as they're tied to the organization or they're still playing in the NHL.
The only players who could get away with saying it.
You'll never hear Patrice Bergeron will never say a word. Never, never, never. He has too much class to come out and say.
Well, that's just it. It's not who he is as a person, but the one or either of them. But the only people who could come out, regardless of what they're doing, where they're working, whether it's with Boston, a different team, or anything like that, the only people who can come out and actually say something are Chara and Bergeron.
Right.
And they're not going to do it.
No, they're not going to.
The one in the locker room who might say something might be Brad Marchand when he's done playing.
I don't see him doing that. I don't see him, because regardless of where he signs in the off season.
Oh, he's going back to Florida.
Regardless, he may not. They may not be able to afford him. Listen,
I think his ask is going to come down considerably, and he's going to be willing
to stay. It doesn't matter.
Stay.
They also have to re-sign Sam Bennett. It's not just Marchand. There's a lot of different factors in Florida. It's not just Marchand. But regardless of where he signs, number one, he's not coming back to Boston. And it doesn't have to do with the fact that he doesn't want to come back to Boston. He's done. He's moved on. And I don't blame him. You know what I mean? When he retires, he'll do the same thing Chara did. He'll sign a one-day contract, and he will retire as a Bruin. He will do the same thing as Chara. Number one. Number two, Brad Marchand is not that player. Brad Marchand, if it was the Brad Marchand from 5 years ago or 8 years ago, maybe. Not the Brad Marchand that was the captain of the Boston Bruins. No, absolutely not. He won't do it. The only player that's going to come out and say anything is going to end up being Jake DeBrusk. If someone says something, it's going to be DeBrusk.
And even then, he's not going to say anything because he's got the media connections to know not to.
Right.
You really think Louis going to let his son run his mouth?
His dad is not going to let him run his mouth. No. Now, again, like I said, 10 years from now, when he's retired, if he doesn't go into broadcasting, if he retires and just goes off into La La Land, right?
Then he might say something.
If he goes on a podcast, he may say something. Or if he goes on it, you know.
He'll be the 78-year-old guy with the story who writes a book.
But if he follows in his father's footsteps and does analyst or any type of media, he's not going to say a word. 60
years from now, whoever the hockey version is of Tony Maserati is going to write a book with him.
or Felger.
Nah, Maz is the better writer.
Well, it's because he is a writer.
That's my point. he knows how to actually write.
He's still a blowhard, but he's a writer.
I don't know how anybody can take the show serious.
People listen to it. That's the problem. It's just like when
They
there's
scream-
a train wreck. When there's a train wreck, what do? You slow down and you look at the train wreck. You want to see the damage.
The way I describe them is they are the audio version of clickbait.
It's not even clickbait. It's literally people listen to complain. Like, and we probably would hear a lot less about it. But the fact that we do have social media, the fact that we do have podcasts, that we have YouTube, that we have all these other channels, they would not, you know what I mean? Like the fact that, because people love to hide behind a keyboard and complain.
Yeah, that's why we want people to come on with a camera. We'll take them on here.
Like Johnny Lazarus the other night said, he was talking about embellishments.
Yes,
on Twitter. I don't know if you saw that tweet.
If it's the one I'm thinking of.
He's like, can we just get it's either a penalty or it's an embellishment? And I get it to a point, because a lot of the times if it's a slash, they can overact and you call both. You do call both. But if it's a phantom call and it's a true embellishment, then you know what I mean? That's kind of where, I mean, but there's no reviewing it, so you have to call both. But I get where he's coming from, because some of the embellishment, especially when it's a dive, when it's an embellishment because it's a dive.
Well, isn't diving still its own penalty? Or did they change it so that diving is technically embellishing?
Yeah. So, but I get where he's coming from. And one of the responses was, well, obviously you never played hockey. So what does he do? He finds a college clip and he puts it out there.
Right.
You know, just because someone has an opinion, like that person who came at him and said, obviously you didn't play hockey, only probably cares about the tunnel vision of his team and doesn't know anyone outside of. That's why, like, there are some, not all, because there are some Bruins fans that know nothing about any other team.
Oh, I know. And having a conversation with them can be so dense.
Right. Like, there's obviously, I'm going to throw Bobby out there. He is so knowledgeable about hockey, being from Winnipeg.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Then you've got Mike Sullivan, who is on, something Bruin.
I love talking to Mike. I used to do this show with Mike.
Huh?
I used to do this show with Mike.
Right, but you get what I'm saying. Like, he knows hockey. He doesn't just know the Bruins.
The thing with Mike is he is also open to learning. He's okay with being wrong.
Right. Well, but what I'm saying is, though, he doesn't have tunnel vision.
No, he doesn't.
It's not just about the Bruins. There are some fans that they only follow the Bruins and former Bruins players. They may know Connor McDavid, but they don't know the Jason Robertsons. They don't know the Matthew Nyes. They don't know Jacob Slavin. You know what I mean? Like, they only have the tunnel. And then, God forbid, they know anyone in the Western Conference.
Yeah, they'll sit there and be like, who's the Utah Mammoth?
Right.
It's like, I don't know, the team that's only been forming for 2 years.
Those are the people that I'm like, and the people, I've been a Bruins fan since the 70s. Okay, so what? I don't care if you've been a Bruins fan since the 70s. If you can't tell me that Sasha Bachhoff is not a great center who deserves to win the Selke, then you're not a hockey fan.
Or if your only comeback is, well, he's not Bergeron. Yeah, no shit. I didn't say he was. Like,
right. No one's Bergeron. No one's going to win 6 Selkies.
Right. It just...
But
that's why I'm trying to expand the coverage that I'm doing with all the other stuff.
No one is Wayne Gretzky. Yes, I get that Alexander Ovechkin is now the all-time leading goal scorer. He's still not Wayne Gretzky.
Right. Where's his other 1,000 assists?
Well, not only that, where's his other Stanley Cups?
Yeah, that too.
Okay.
That too.
Mark Messier, I would put him above Ovechkin.
Again, it also depends on the conversation, because if you're talking about just as a pure goal scorer, as a shooter, Ovechkin's still right up there. He's going to be above a guy like Mark Messier. He's going to be up there with Gretzky
but they both, Gretzky and Messier and Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid, they have that all around play.
Right. You're never going to see, and nominated for the Selke Trophy this year is Alex Ovechkin.
Right.
You're never going to see that.
Right.
You would see Gretzky nominated for every single award that was possibly available, including the ones that you sit there and go, there's an award for that?
Well, except for the Norris.
I mean, he'd find a way to do it.
But my point is, though, is that...
No, Bergeron would find a way to do that.
Yeah. My point is, for people that don't want to look outside of the Boston fandom.
Right. But they're also the ones that look at Mason Lohrei and go, we got to move him back up to wing. No, go find the winger.
Right.
like you have taken one problem, which is a defenseman with problems, and you have now made a confused 24-year-old who doesn't know if he's a winger or a defenseman, causing problems in your forward group and in your defensive group. You've now created more problems by trying to do that. Just go find the winger or go find the defenseman and find a way to move on from the problem.
Right.
Now, they moved on from the problem that was Jake DeBrusk. Oh, Medicine Hat just added the empty net goal. So now it is 3-1. London certainly had their opportunities, though. 36 shots.
Wow.
So, but there's about 11 seconds left in this. This was the last game in the round robin. So Medicine Hat will go into the tournament as the 1 seed, and London will go in as the 2 seed. So it'll be an interesting tournament going forward, though. So, but yeah, I promise, not a 3-hour show. So I just noticed the time, given that this game is ending. I don't even know what do we have for a score in the Dallas Edmonton game? Is it
2-1 Edmonton?
2-1. Okay.
Yeah, just the second just ended. Corey Perry scored the second goal for Edmonton.
I hate to ask this, but how would you feel if Boston went after Corey Perry in the offseason?
No. Unless it's absolute zero money.
That's what I'm talking about. A dirt cheap contract for basically a 4th line role.
My problem with him is he doesn't push out the current 4th liners.
I don't see him having reason to sign with Boston, because at 40 he's going to want.
The other thing is too is that
honestly, I put Perry in Florida next season.
I don't know.
If he wins the cup this year, then I can see him retiring. Because he is doing his damnedest to get one more cup.
Right.
And I can totally see him jumping on with Florida next season if he doesn't get it this year. But
I don't know.
there's a lot of moving pieces. I hope we get our coach soon.
Yep.
Because that allows us to have the lineup conversation. But I mean, we're in agreement.
You're still not going to have the lineup conversation till July 2nd.
Has a little bit more of a conversation, at least.
Yes. I mean, you can have a little bit more of a conversation, but you're still not going to have a full lineup until, I mean, and even then, it depends on who they bring in, who gets offer sheets, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many factors out there that even once they get that coach, there's still so many holes.
You mentioned the RFA offer sheets. Is there anyone that you're worried about this offseason that Boston could lose to an offer sheet?
No.
Because the offer just comes in at a point where you sit there and go, it's not worth it. We'll take the
only person that I think is going to get an offer sheet if they're not signed is Geeky. And I think Boston matches it. I don't think they let him walk.
You don't think there's a team with a lot of cap space that needs to maintain floor minimum that might overpay for Geeky? If there is, I would take the draft pick compensation for sure. I mean,
yeah, but I don't think that there's a team that's going to do that.
Because once you get to a first and a third, are you taking that for Morgan Geekie?
No, not unless you already have backup plans, because where's your secondary scoring?
I mean, you already don't have secondary scoring even with Morgan Geekie.
So are you going to give up more scoring for draft capital that's not going to be ready? I mean, that makes no sense.
You're still matching it at that point. So
right. So
I'd be more worried about a retaliatory offer sheet next season, because your RFA list next season far outweighs this season's.
Right.
Because next season you have Brunet, Bancroft, Duran, and Liesel and Poitras all hitting restricted free agency.
But I think it also depends on what they do this year, because what they do this year affects those offer sheets next year.
Oh, absolutely.
Like where's Poitras? Is Poitras in the NHL? Does he make it to the NHL? Is he in the NHL full time? Do they work on that extension before? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many other different factors. So I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves skipping into next year.
That's why I've never bought into the revenge offer sheet. Like, I know we've seen it, Kotkaniemi being the key one for revenge on Aho, but like,
yeah, but the offer sheets are so few and far between.
They shouldn't be, though. That's my point. It's like,
because most of the time the team that retains their rights are giving them offers, and other teams, like, there's no reason to, like, if Toronto wants to keep Nyes and he wants to stay in Toronto, he's not even entertaining sheets. You know what I mean?
Right. But like, I look at the New York Rangers as a great example, right? They have about a little less than $8.5 million, and they have 7 restricted free agents just off of their NHL roster alone. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying, you want to throw a whole bunch of money at Keandre Miller, because, your left side is pretty decent.
But let's keep in mind, if they don't make an offer, they don't own the rights to him anymore.
Right.
So that's the other thing. So if they may say we're moving on and they're not going to make an offer, they become an unrestricted free agent. That's why you don't see a lot of offer sheets. Because
if you're the Rangers, though, are you really not offer sheeting Keandre Miller, Will Cooley, or Arthur Kaliev?
It depends on what their value is and what you have for cap space. Now, do you do the same thing that the Bruins did and move on from a Nick Foligno and a Taylor Hall to be able to make those offers? You know what I mean? And then bring in other free agents at lower dollar amounts. That's why you don't see a lot of offer sheets.
There are other avenues for sure. There are other avenues that teams can use to clear up their cap space. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I'm just saying that you should not be afraid to offer sheet someone now for fear of someone offer sheeting your player later.
I don't think that teams have that mentality. I don't think teams have that mentality at all.
And I do wonder if someone like Juuso Parssinen might become available from the Rangers.
I don't think that Don Sweeney's gonna not make an offer because he thinks that Toronto's going to come back and make an offer. It's what's right for the club. They're not going to make offers in retaliation. That's not what clubs because the clubs are the GMs are a lot closer than what it was when there was only, however many teams. There's 32 teams in the NHL. They're not going, oh, I'm going to screw over Toronto. When they made a trade with Toronto,
right.
That used to be the taboo, was trading within your own division.
And it still is a little bit, obviously, but at the same time, you take the best deal that you get.
I 100% disagree with you. Like, them trade, because a lot of it too is not just yes, it's a business and everything, but people forget the humanity part of it. It's just like, did they want to trade Brad Marchand to Florida? Probably not, but they did what they could to reward the player that gave him 14 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, but it also, they could have probably gotten a better deal out of any other club, but they did right by Marchand.
Well, it all comes down to your values as an organization too.
Right.
And as a general manager. And the values that Don Sweeney has shown for the last decade is what has made him so respected around the league.
But that's also the league now. It's not just Don Sweeney. It's the league. It's all the GMs. They're a lot closer than you know what I mean? The league is completely different. So when St. Louis made those offer sheets for what's their faces, the two players from
Broberg and Holloway,
it wasn't because we want to piss off Edmonton.
It was, this is what's best for our team.
This is what's best for our team. They knew Edmonton was kind of up against the cap too. So it wasn't to hurt Edmonton. It was to make St. Louis better.
Right.
And they're not afraid that Edmonton's going to come back and do it to them now.
And even if they do, you deal with it.
Right.
Because
but their GMs don't fear retaliatory. That's
I don't think they should. Again, my mindset is the moment I'm worried about the moment I make decisions about my players based on what another team might do, that's the moment that I'm not controlling my own team.
Correct.
And that's where you start to.
And that's why Don Sweeney is going to do what's right for Boston, not what's right for Toronto. So if he makes it, they lay out a contract for Morgan Geekie, and another team decides that they feel Morgan Geekie is worth more, and the Bruins say, I can't match that because I don't have the cap space or I have other holes to fill, then that's Don Sweeney's decision. Mm-hmm. But I don't think another team is going to go above and beyond for a kid that has shown growth over the last 2 years, but isn't a proven goal scorer.
Who they also might look at and go, do we have a David Pastrnak he can play with?
Right.
Because that's going to be kind of the caveat too, is you're not
you have to
looking
also look at what teams would make those offers. Toronto's not making that offer.
No, they already
Florida's
have.
Not making that offer. The teams that are contending are not making those offers. It's the teams that are rebuilding that are going to make those offers, like a Chicago, an Anaheim, a Utah. You know what I mean? It's those type of teams, and they don't have the players surrounding him.
The only disagreement I would have with Chicago is they'd be able to put him with a Connor Bedard.
And what has Connor Bedard done?
Well, that's just it. What has he done that says that he's going to be a David Pastrnak type player?
Right.
So you're taking a massive guess. You're not overpaying for a guess.
Right.
That's the kind of thing that would come back to bite them in the ass. So, although Chicago will be interesting to watch because, again, with Brossoit coming back off the major injuries, they might need a number 2 goaltender, depending on how his health goes. Of course, if he's that unhealthy, he may just retire, but that's beside the point. They're still going to re-sign Arvid Soderblom, and they're going to go with Knight and Soderblom in net. So Korpisalo's off the table there.
Right.
But they've already got a couple guys retiring going into next season. Martinez has already said he's going to be retiring, and Maroon up front.
Right.
So, and we know they're not going back to the Corey Perry well.
No. Oh, God, no.
So it's, but then they've got Foligno and Dickinson and Mikheyev and Villano and Reichel.
How many more years does Foligno have?
Well, they're all on 1-year contracts at that point.
Right, but I'm talking health. I'm talking health and age-wise. How many more years does Foligno have?
37, probably one more after this.
Right.
Like he's a transition guy to, he's the one that you hope can hand the C over to Bedard.
Right.
But you want to try to get Foligno to play until he's 39, maybe. before you do that, just to really establish that culture before he's gone. But yeah, I mean, even then, like you've got to do some serious turnaround. The Sharks are going to be interesting to watch. But again, these are all the teams that have cap space to match, and they're not going to do it because they don't want to set the market for someone else's player. Like, why is San Jose going to come in and be like, we want to offer Morgan Geekie a 5-year contract at $7 million?
Right.
We'll give you the first and the third, and we'll get Geekie. Well, no, thanks for telling us what our contract should be.
Right.
You know, and even then, they can match, but they can also do better.
Right.
They can go, we'll go 8 years at $9 million. Thank you very much. How's that sound, Morgan? Like, even yeah, like it just, why would you do that to yourself if you're San Jose? You're helping the other team at that point. So, yeah. Anyway, do you have any other final thoughts, whether it be the
Well, did you see the Chicago? You saw that Chicago hired their coach, right?
Yes.
Jeff Bledsoe.
Thank you. The former guy from Detroit.
Right, and he spent the last 3 years with Cooper in Tampa Bay.
I like that hire for them simply because Blashill showed in Detroit that he can work with young players and develop them. Whether or not he can get them to a playoff or a contending level, we don't know.
Yeah, but again, that's not, see, that's the other thing too, is that he's going to have a longer leash in Chicago than he would in a Boston team or a Philadelphia team, teams that are closer to making the play. Like Chicago's still a ways off from making the playoffs.
Right. That's why Warsofsky has the leash that he has in San Jose.
Right.
They're making positive strides. I mean, the Ducks situation, they want to be contending soon. That's why they made the aggressive move to get Joel Asshole. But that's what they're doing on the ice, and that's their decision. We'll just call it a decision.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to reassess and evaluate how that decision goes.
Yeah.
But at least on the ice, he was best available.
Yep.
So on the ice for that team trying to do what they're trying to do, it made sense.
Yeah.
Let's see. Who else doesn't have coaches still? Pittsburgh,
Boston, and there's one other one.
Why can't I think of who it is?
There's 3.
It's going to bother the hell out of me now. It's going to bother the hell out of me.
It's not going to bother you for that much longer.
Once we get the answer. Good.
Yeah.
And let's not forget that I actually forgot about this.
The Kraken.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
It's the Kraken. Because Philly has their coach. The Rangers have their coach. Anaheim and Chicago now have their coaches. So it leaves the Bruins, Pittsburgh, and Kraken. Oh, and Vancouver.
Oh, yeah. Vancouver.
Vancouver.
San Jose is going to have almost $50 million in cap space.
Mm-hmm. They may go after Marner.
They should.
Yeah.
They really should. And honestly, if I'm them, I would also look to go after Jake Allen because he would be a great goaltender to go with Yaroslav Askarov to just mentor him along. They would need someone to go with Askarov in the future, but that you can do that easily. I'm looking at their D right now. I could see them making a good push for Fabro.
Yeah.
They could use some depth on the right side. Veteran. The problem is they don't have a lot of veterans. Mario Ferrero is on the last year of his deal. Timothy Liljegren is on the last year of his deal. Vincent Desharnais. All of their defensemen, none of them are signed past next year.
Right.
So getting a veteran defenseman on a multi-year deal would benefit them greatly. Jesus, they have no money being spent though, because Vlasic comes off the books at the end of the season, and going into the season, Couture comes off the books. There's $15 million more right there. That puts them at $54 million in cap space.
Right.
Like, oh my God. And they have I know they're retaining on, I think the Burns deal ends. Where is, Martin Jones, that was buyout, retained right here. They got Erik Karlsson on the books for $1.5 million for 2 more years, and Thomas Hertl for 4 more years.
Right.
But that's only $1.3 million, so that's not going to hurt them that much.
No.
Boy, Greer did a great job on this rebuild. Their defense was a massive problem, and I mean, yeah, he's got to rebuild the defense, but like that's not as rebuilding a defensive group is not as hard as rebuilding a forward group.
Correct.
And he's already done the forward group. Toffoli, Wenberg, Gaudreau, Delandria will be an RFA at the end of the next season, and then that's their veteran group. Now they got Celebrini, right. Smith, Graf, Eklund.
Right.
I mean that's their core 4.
Right.
But Nikolai Kovalenko as well, and they've got guys in with the Barracuda too.
Right.
So they've got a leash, but Seattle, you mentioned Seattle needing a coach. They're the ones that are working on tearing it down, which is weird to say.
Right, because they're so new.
You think they're regretting that Chandler Stevenson contract yet?
Maybe.
Do you think he might waive to leave Seattle?
I don't know. Because he has 3 more years of the no trade.
Full no move.
And then he's got he's got 3 of the no trade and then 3 of the modified.
Yeah, and it's modified to 10 teams.
Yeah.
But they're not exactly heading the same direction they were in when you signed that deal last year.
Oh, same thing with Brandon Montour.
Yep. And Montour has the full no trade clause. So
yeah, he only has 2 seasons and then he goes to the modified.
Yep. 15 team, I think.
Even Adam Larson has 2. Full no trade, and then he goes to the 2.
Vince Dunn is modified to half the league. Jamie Alexiak, that's a waste of a no trade clause. Modified.
But you know what? They pretty much hand those out with candy now. I mean, let's be realistic.
Do you think a team is limited in them?
I think that teams are literally, they're just trying to. It's more enticing for a player to have the choice.
Yeah.
To veto a trade, because let's be realistic. Mitch Marner, okay? He was reportedly offered a trade. He vetoed it. Allmark vetoed it. You know what I mean? Because players, it's not just the players nowadays are not the players of the 70s that didn't have the families. You know what I mean? They have families. They have children that are in school. They have not only that, but their mental health. Nowadays is so different. Even if you look at, I mean, across all sports too, it's not just hockey. Across all sports, the mental health, I got into the argument because I saw a Toronto fan say that Florida was circumventing the cap. They're not circumventing the cap. Yes, the no income tax is definitely desirable, but they are not circumventing the cap.
Everyone has the same salary cap. That's
not what circumventing the cap is what Vegas has done with LTIR.
But even then, they didn't circumvent the cap because that's the way the rule is currently written.
Right. But they're doing it because all teams are doing it.
All teams are doing it because they're able to do it. And
now the Bruins should have done it, but they didn't. They should have done it with Lindholm, but they didn't do it because they could have gone out and got, someone to replace him basically. But they didn't do it because they didn't want to risk it. And I get why the Bruins didn't do it, but they could have.
They could have. Absolutely. But here's the thing, though. Because the reason why they didn't is because they thought while they were in the playoff hunt, they thought if they needed to push Lindholm back, they could have.
No, I disagree with you.
You don't think he was ever coming back?
He had the setback. That was the difference. He had the setback.
Well, that's what I mean. Up until that setback.
They had to go back in. They would never have asked him to push it through knowing what he went through, because then they would be risking his career.
Right. Once he had the setback, then it became off the table. But they were trying to push him back, and that's how he had the setback. So there was a possibility.
They weren't pushing. The Bruins have never pushed players.
No.
The Bruins have never pushed players.
He was pushing to get back.
Let's not put that in the universe. The Bruins have never rushed back a player. In fact, the Bruins get ridiculed for coddling players sometimes.
Yeah, no. He was pushing to come back.
Correct.
Up until his setback, and he said no. Right. Now, would it have benefited the team to retro him on LTIR and use his cap space to bring in another player?
Not after they lost McAvoy.
Exactly.
So that's the whole thing. So, but there are teams out there that circumvent the cap.
And that didn't happen. They didn't lose McAvoy until after they lost him at Four Nations. And they didn't know how long he was going to be out until after the trade deadline.
Correct.
And by that point, it wasn't worth pushing McAvoy or McAvoy pushing himself to come back.
McAvoy he may have been more to push himself to come back, but he wouldn't have gotten cleared.
Yeah.
Because even McAvoy said at breakup day that he had just gotten cleared. So if
there's 2 weeks left in the season, McAvoy plays again.
Right. So I mean, at that point, where the Bruins were,
but it just wasn't worth.
It just wasn't worth it.
Right. Yeah. It's. I mean, you're a completely different team with them. You're a completely different team with Elias healthy as well.
And a completely different team with a Swayman that goes through training camp.
Yep. I do think now that he's won gold, he looks at it in terms of, I have proven a point that I have this level still in me. And then he's just going to go focus on training. I don't think we're going to hear from Jeremy Swayman over the summer.
I don't think you would have heard from Jeremy Swayman regardless.
Probably not.
He doesn't seek the media.
Media seeks him.
Right. And media sought him out last year because of the contract. And I still blame majority of that on his agent. Yes, he wants the best deal possible, but he didn't sit there and go, you know what I mean? He's not. I still don't trust his agent. So, yeah,
and I love the fact that everyone was overreacting when things did quote unquote leak out. He's asking for $10 million. Okay, so what if he is like? Right. That's his agent leveraging his position to say, we want $10 million. Where are you at? Yeah. Like, it's called negotiation. That's how they got to 8. Right. So it's going to be a significantly quiet offseason for them. We got development camp seemingly right around the corner once the cup is awarded. So I will be more anxious to watch the NHL game once the Cup final comes around. These conference finals are just not capturing me.
This is a great game.
Is it still 1-0?
It's 2-1.
I'm sorry, 2-1.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was thinking. I mean, it's still essentially a 1-0 game. It's a 1-goal game.
But those are the best games. It's not a blowout. It's an actually competitive game.
Yeah. That one's on Max today, right? That's the Max series?
No, it's on ESPN.
What do you think of the alternating?
The Western is on ESPN and the Eastern is on TNT.
What do you think of how they've been alternating those broadcasts?
I think both broadcasts suck.
Can we get the TSN broadcast?
They do. They suck.
You know what is sad? The Memorial Cup broadcasts are better than these ones. That's the other thing is there's just too much. I
have no problems with Sean McDonough being a play-by-play guy. I think Sean McDonough is a decent play-by-play guy. That's not the issue. It's the broadcast itself. It's the sound. It's the in-game stupid stuff. It's the, treating hockey fans like we're idiots. It's the intermission teams are horrible.
I think they're trying way too hard.
Well, the problem is that ESPN doesn't give a shit about hockey.
No, I don't know. And I don't understand. The first round, I was sitting here pulling my hair out going, why aren't they available on ESPN Plus?
Right.
You had ESPN games that were only
let's not even talk about the fact that they weren't even sending broadcasters to the games. They were.
I wasn't even going to get to that part because that part just is asinine.
Yeah.
And don't tell me about the budget or any of that shit. You're fucking ESPN. You have the money. You're Disney.
Then let the local teams have their rounds.
You know who doesn't have the money to send a media team? Us.
Yeah.
We can't go to that and cover it because we don't have that kind of media, budget or anything like that. I barely have the budget to do my show from my living room.
Right.
But we still do.
Right.
But I don't mind sometimes when they do the name badges of who's where on the ice. I don't like it all the time, but every once in a while they'll do it, like on a power play or something like that. And you're like, because at least with Nesson, they throw up the who's on the ice at the bottom banner.
That's different. That's on the bottom. I'm talking when you have the badges on the players on the ice when you're trying to follow the puck.
I don't mind it when it's not condensed. Like when you have 3 or 4 of those badges that are overlapping with each other.
No,
that's not the time to have it.
Have the tracker at the bottom.
Yep.
Have the tracker at the bottom on ice with the numbers. You don't even have to put the names. Just have the numbers. If you're a hockey fan, you know who they are.
Or you'll fucking Google them.
Right.
But I will say, did you ever watch the alternate cast that had Mike Kelly doing the analysis alongside? It was on ESPN Plus only at the time. I think it was last year's playoffs. They had, not only did they have who was on the ice at the bottom, but they had the length of each player's shift. They had every once in a while they'd throw up how fast the player had skated. Like if it was a breakaway or something, they'd throw up how fast they skated.
So I'll throw out there Nesson 360, the app. Okay?
Yes.
You can pull up the stats. You can pull them up. Can pull. So you control what you're watching and learning. That's what broadcast should do. They should give you the option to pull up statistics if you want to. If you want to pull up who's on the ice, who's doing this, who's doing that, they should give you the options to do that. It shouldn't be force-fed.
I know you can't comment, but that's the one good thing about the Nesson 360 app. Not much else is good about the app, but That is a fantastic feature of the app.
I tested that. So I tested that, and I broke down specific things and told them, especially like I was one of the testers for hockey more, and I did a little bit baseball, but I did a lot more for hockey.
So they do it with baseball too.
Yes.
That's
so, but again, it's one of those things where, as someone that is knowledgeable about the sport, like I broke it down that way and then put, this works for people that may not be, to have this much more would be for people that want to do that research. But the best part about those apps is that you don't have to leave to go Google.
Right.
You can find it right there on both teams. You know what I mean? But for ESPN, because they don't know anything about hockey, they're expecting the rest of the world to not know anything about hockey.
That, and when they use the wrong player image for the wrong name, they've done that countless times. You paid millions of dollars for these rights, and then they screw them up.
By who?
Oh, Stern becoming coach has just been reported. Interesting.
By who? Because I'm not seeing it anywhere.
Yeah, I'll have to. See, now we're both going to try and find it.
Cam Robertson. From Elite Prospects.
Hearing Marco Sturm is set to become the next Boston Bruins head coach. That was a tweet from 2 minutes ago.
But from Elite Prospects?
Yeah. I mean, can we get a slightly more reliable Boston source?
Or even a national source? Like, is Friedman reporting it? I don't even
Yeah,
there's no one. There's no one.
And based on his position as the content director and director of film scouting, this almost seems like a planted leak.
Right.
Someone whispered the wrong thing into his head on purpose to almost test to see whether it would get out there.
Right.
Because there's no one.
No, not Friedman, not LeBron, not anyone, not Chris Johnson.
Ty doesn't even have this one.
Well, no offense.
Not that he gets every little piece of information, but
he doesn't. I love Ty. I know Ty. I know him.
No, yeah, I've had conversations with him before too. So he's actually been on this show before.
But he's not he doesn't have the inside scoop.
No, he's not getting it. There's no one local who has it. There's no Kevin Paul Dupont who has it. There's no,
listen,
Elite Prospects.
Listen, I'm in a special group.
Oh, I'm sure you are.
Of my employer, and I'm not seeing anything.
That's what I mean. I mean, there's plenty of groups out there that, that's why these leaks happen the way they do. That's why, Frank Saravelli was able to put out the entire Seattle or Vegas lineup before it was even drafted. Like, some of it's common ability to just know the players of the game and figure out what they're going to do and educated guess at a high level. And some of it is people are just going to tell me because they don't care. And sometimes people lose their jobs over it. Other times they don't. So it's.
Yeah, there's not one other person. And I'm not saying it's not true.
Right.
But I'm just saying there's not one other person that's leaking this. And until I have a credible source.
Yeah. I'm not running this news to the front page right this moment.
No.
I'm not seeing anything from.
There's no one.
And now it's just people who are replying to his tweet.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, everyone's replying and retweeting it, but there's no other person that has broke that news.
Yeah. And it's honestly, it's all likes.
Puck Empire, Marco Sturm is set to. Who's Puck Empire?
I don't know, but Marco. Oh, they're saying per him.
Right. But that's why I'm saying, like, again, like the people that are putting it out there aren't secondary sources.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah. Again, like you said, we're not saying this is wrong. But I mean, and I'm already seeing some people react to it like it's confirmed fact, but it just, remember how we all felt when a certain radio station sent out some information about a dispute between two best friends on this team?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that source was so credible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't go quite so far to say that I believe it.
Yeah, because even like everyone is retweeting him or saying per him, and there's not one other person that has posted it.
Because the funny thing, and as a journalist, you can tell me your thoughts on this, but as long as I go per him, when it comes out to be wrong, I can be like, well, I just was telling you what he said.
Yeah, I can tell you as the parent as them being one of the parent clubs, we have to have two credible sources. And he's not a credible source. He would not be considered a credible source for us to report it at Nesson.
Right. Honestly, I wouldn't even write the article myself on my own website yet. I mean, it might be one that it's like, okay, well, so I don't have to write it later. If it is true, let me throw it in the drafts. But at the same time, if that were going to be the case, I'd have all four ready to go based on the four finalists for the job. Just so I don't have to write it later in a rush.
Yeah, everyone is saying per him. And I'm like, yeah, no.
And I'm sorry, but yeah, it would be very Bruins-esque to issue that on a Tuesday with Game 4. Probably not. Let's be real. If they were going to go,
no, it would be during an Eastern Conference, not a Western Conference.
It would be a Friday night news dump with something that can cover it up.
No, not if it's a popular one. Not if they think it's popular.
Well, that's my point. Is Marco Sturm the most popular option right now? I could totally see them doing a late afternoon coach dump just in case it doesn't go the way they think it will. But now, if this was Fluto, I'd believe it.
Yeah, Fluto's not going to break it though unless it's 100%, because Fluto's not going to risk his relationship with the Bruins.
No.
That's the whole thing. No one that's going to risk their relationship with the Bruins is going to run with this until it's confirmed.
Right, and a bunch of them are probably getting on the phone right now. I can totally see Fluto making 3 or 4 phone calls, sending out some text messages or something, going, "Hey, someone's reporting this. Can you verify this or whatever?" But he's not going to do it until his sources are confirming it.
Right.
Of course, now I'm hitting massively hitting the refresh button to see if anybody else does report it, but
no.
That's the funny thing is this is going to start trending before we even confirm it. And I don't know. Yeah,
So much
I'm
for
seeing.
our short podcast.
I know. Well, now we've got this, but I'll ask. I'll let us wrap it up because we could do this all night. We will continue to dig on the Sturm hiring possibility. I don't think it's done yet. I think there's more to come on this. Do you have any other final thoughts, though, that we will share with the lovely public of the folks who are currently still watching, which we greatly appreciate?
Yeah, just wait for credible sources before you run with something.
Hey, I don't think Nick was bringing it to our attention as this is definitive. He's saying it's been reported. So I will give Nick the benefit of the doubt there. I'm not saying.
Oh, I'm not
he
talking. I'm
believed it.
not saying. Yeah,
But-
no, nothing to him. I'm just saying, literally, I would be careful with who's reporting it and waiting for legitimate sources.
Yeah, don't rush off and retweet it and take it as fact just yet. Get it confirmed and then take it, run with it as fact.
Yeah.
Dude, this tweet has already been seen 42,000 times in 12 minutes. Like, people have keyword searches on this and it's blowing up, but it's still the only one out there.
Yeah.
And all just throwing this out there, all of the accounts that are like responding to it have like, 200 something followers, 100 something followers, like, and they're a couple of them are like clearly not run by someone who's on Twitter frequently.
Right.
NHL news, nope, they're crediting him. So
Yeah, no, I already saw that. Their puck report. Yeah, they're crediting him.
yeah.
There's literally no one. J Fresh Hockey. Again, but they're saying they're not saying who, they're just saying the new head coach of the Boston Bruins will be. And again, they're not a credible source. Yes,
No.
they have their advanced hockey stats and they have a ton of followers, but they're not a newsworthy.
Right. And if you look what they're putting out with it, they're just putting out projections as far as, WAR and advanced analytics statistical data. They're not
Right. Yeah, there's still no one. Again, not.
And that's not to say they
Freeman,
don't do a
not
good job.
LeBron, not Johnson, not Fluto. No one is putting it out there.
Yeah. Again, maybe in an hour it'll be confirmed by some of those guys. Because again, when something like this goes out, they're going to start doing their research to confirm and say, hey,
Right.
this is out there. Once you start seeing one of those guys confirm it, though, then you'll see 2, 3, 4 of them confirm it.
Mhm.
But yeah, with that, I'll let everyone go. Thank everybody for watching. And if there is an actual coaching hire, we may not wait 10 days to do another one of these. But for now, rather than sit and watch my ugly mug refresh Twitter, do you have any other final thoughts, Gayle, before we let the people go?
No. If they hire Sturm, we'll have to look and see when we can jump on. It might have to be a lunch day. afternoon type thing. Because
We'll do something.
I'm working the rest of the week.
We'll do something. The people know we're here for them. So,
Yeah.
We'll do something. And, Dom, if you're watching, we wish you well as well.
Yes.
And
yes.
hopefully we get you back soon too. But in the meantime, go Bees.